Welcome back to Casual Cafe here at Tragedy and Hope. Today we've got a special guest, Will Pangman, who we're going to talk about Bitcoin. We're going to have a little adventure into Bitcoin. A lot of people who are familiar with the content here have seen my scrutiny. You've heard my reasonable reasons to look into this and to be aware. And we're going to talk about some of that stuff today. But I think I've looked enough at how this game is played, and I'd like to spin the wheel, so to speak, to employ a little metaphor. And a way to do that is to start learning by jumping in. We're going to create a wallet. We're going to talk about some of the steps to prevent your personal information from being stolen if you should, want to go into the Bitcoin world and see what's going on. So it's an adventure, and I'm glad to have a guide today, Will Pangman, as I said, who was introduced to me by Ernie Hancock and Tim Fry. And over the past couple of weeks, since PorkFest, since I had a lot of exposure to the Bitcoin community there, I've thought more and more about it. And Will was finally kind enough to review some of my critiques and criticisms and provide reasonable and logical answers and other measures and tactics and methods to help me feel secure. And that's why I'm willing to introduce it to you and share this personal adventure into the world of Bitcoin. So, Will, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rich. Thanks for having me.
All right. So I'm going to let you lead the way here today. What is the first step? I know a little bit about Bitcoin. I've done some research. I have never used it. So I would imagine we have to start at some place like blockchain.info. That's as far as my research has gone in this part.
Yeah, I think blockchain.info is one company that provides web-based wallets. It's the kind of Bitcoin wallet where the user controls all the private keys of their wallet, which is very important. Most people are attracted to Bitcoin because of the autonomy it provides them with their financial behavior. And blockchain.info is very respectful of that. There are other companies which are respectful of that too, but maybe see a profit motive to provide safeguarding, caretaking of your private keys for you, and they do that for free in most cases. But again, you're trusting a third party, and in my opinion, while there may be some cases where that's useful, the whole point of Bitcoin is to no longer need to trust a third party with your financial behavior. So that's what really attracted me in the first place to it. I like being autonomous and being independent. So Bitcoin was, very much a self-starter for me. So yeah, blockchain.info is great. I think I know people there at the company, and I know that their hearts and minds are in the right place for sure. Very much in accordance with kind of the way we would like to see security and privacy on the internet handled. You and I, Rich, the folks at blockchain.info are very much aligned with that. So some prominent, free-thinking individuals or individually minded folks who are into self-ownership and the ideas of personal freedom who are there. Roger Ver was an early investor in blockchain.info. He's a very prominent Bitcoiner, big supporter of Free Talk Live and other types of like-minded media outlets. And there's several others there too. Andreas Antonopoulos, I don't know how he self-identifies in terms of a worldview or philosophy, but if you hear him talk, it's pretty clear. And as a friend, I know that he very staunchly believes in privacy, personal freedom, and autonomy. So their hearts are in the right place. So blockchain's a great place to start. But before we even start there, I want to make sure that some of the users out there who are new to lots of things that seem to be coming out online all the time, maybe they don't have the best habits in place already for personal security online.
Right. Let's talk about that, because that's the pre-production work, if you will. If you want to set up in the world of Bitcoin, if you want to take that adventure, first, let's make sure that you already have a secure computer and make sure that you're not doing anything that might compromise your endeavor. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this may be a big step for a lot of people, but I hugely, hugely encourage folks to attempt this and try to follow along and make this big change in your online behavior. It's easy to maintain, but it's hard to do in the first place. So just because of how most of us are used to using the internet and computers, we're familiar with signing up for a secure account on various websites, maybe our bank, maybe Facebook, maybe other such websites. And we usually create a username, which is essentially linked to an email address, and a password, which is the one key that we use to get into that new account. And that password is usually something we can easily remember. So often people recycle the same 2 and 3 passwords with very slight variations. So if one service gets hacked, then it's very easy to hack more and more services. And in the way that the web is working these days, where these accounts are linked to each other, which is very useful in some cases and also kind of a bother in others, very poor secure behavior can lead to your whole online world, your whole online identity, and thus your real world identity being hijacked and, sensitive information stolen and used against you. We're familiar with identity theft, but there's far more instances that could be very harmful. So than just that. So the big step I want folks to take is to consider how many passwords you currently use and how you currently manage those. And more than likely, folks are managing them in their brains, and maybe they have Post-it notes. Maybe they have Post-it notes stuck on their computer monitor with passwords on them, or they're maybe in a junk drawer on the computer desk. Anyone will probably admit that, yeah, this isn't the best system, but it works for them for now and stuff. And this is a very uncertain world for a lot of folks getting online and doing more and more of our activities online. So that works for now. But I would like to have folks consider using a randomly generated password that's long and hard for every single site that they log into, and slowly but surely over time changing all their existing passwords to be one that's randomly generated and long and difficult to crack. And there are tools that allow you to manage these and remember them. If you like the pen and paper method, I still use the pen and paper method. I write down passwords in a secure booklet that I keep in a safe when I'm not using it at hand. And, it's not 100% secure. There's nothing that's 100% secure, whether it's physical security or digital or network security, but we can get pretty close. So I feel good about physically securing that booklet because humankind is very used to physical security. We're not so used to digital security or network security. We've only been practicing that for several decades. So I still use the physical security method in pen and paper, but there are other tools I use as well that people might be interested in, give them a very much easier time changing this behavior I'm talking about of using the same passwords that are weak over and over, changing that to randomly generated passwords that are each of them are unique. And one tool that I'll mention is called LastPass, LastPass. I use it. It's a pretty good service. It's not open source, so it can't completely 100% be trusted, to keep any of the private information that it does store for you secure. But it's encrypted at multiple levels. It's very user-friendly. It works across platforms, so on multiple computers or multiple, handheld or mobile devices. LastPass is great. If you prefer an open source solution to manage all your passwords, I recommend KeePassX. That's KeePass and the letter X, all in one word. And that's an open source solution that's also pretty easy to set up, a little bit more difficult, but it might feel more familiar to some earlier computer users, some older folks out there who were using the internet in the 90s and stuff. Not that it looks like that, it just kind of has that retro feel to it somewhat. LastPass is a browser plugin that you can get for Firefox or Chrome. So it just lives right inside your web browser, which is convenient. And so those are two systems I highly recommend people set up. And we can go through that maybe as an appendix if you want, Rich, at the end. But I'd like to jump into securing email accounts.
All right, so let's figure out, how do I secure my email account if I haven't already done that?
Sure. So most folks, again, have just a password they memorize for their email account. And some folks maybe have used other factors to secure their email. Maybe every time you're about to log in, you get a text message from Google or Yahoo or whichever email service you're using, and that lets you in. So what we're going to do is, to all of our accounts, before we do anything with Bitcoin, all of our email accounts that we might associate with any Bitcoin accounts, Bitcoin-related accounts, is something called two-factor authentication. We're going to turn that on in addition to the passwords that we have. Hopefully that we're no longer memorizing because we're using a key management tool like LastPass or KeePassX, and there's several others. So go looking around, and I don't work with either of those companies, and open source projects or whatever. I just like them. So look around. There's other solutions, but you're going to turn on two-factor authentication. What that means is you're going to have two passwords to get into your account. One is maybe one that you've memorized or that you're using a tool to help you organize. And the other is something that you hold with you. And this comes in the form of sometimes like a USB-shaped dongle that will attach to your keychain or something, and your computer reads it when you're nearby and lets you in, because it knows that not only is this someone who knows the password, but it's actually the one person who possesses the second key, and it'll let you in that way. But I think more convenient and pretty much just as secure is an app for any smartphone. There's a couple of these apps. One is called Google Authenticator, and one is called Authy, Authy. I like them both. I use them both, but try either one. And what this is basically when you turn the setting on with Google or with blockchain, like we will see in a moment here, it's going to give you access to a second key, the second factor, in the form of a token. And that token's a number that's randomly changing every 30 or 20 seconds. And the reason for that is just because during that 30 or 20 seconds that the number is available for you, that's the time that you're going to enter it to log into your account. So you're going to go to, let's say, Google. You're going to type in your username or your email at Google. You're going to type in the password that you've either memorized or you've got stored in a booklet or on another tool. And then you're going to be asked for a second code. And that's the two-factor code. And you'll open up this app on your phone, and it'll show you a timer. Let's say it's at 17 seconds and ticking down, and there's a 6-digit number there. So type in that 6-digit number, and you're in, as long as you do it within that 20 seconds. And if you don't do it within 20 seconds, maybe just wait for the next number. A new number will refresh, and Google will be ready to receive that number at that time. So it's just a way of proving that you are you, and you own this account, and only you are allowed in. And you're doing that through two keys, a key that you know and a key that you have. And it's hard to steal both. And this is why we're going to implement two-factor authentication as a security setting on email and on our Google wallets, or Bitcoin wallets. And the reason for that is a lot of people who are very, very well versed in Bitcoin may or may not have had this setting turned on when they were hacked and stolen. In most cases, what I'm finding is, and maybe we can talk about some of the kinds of hacks and thefts that have happened, Rich, because I know that's probably weighing on a lot of people. You know, if they hear about someone who's high profile in the Bitcoin world experiencing a hack, you know, it might give them insecurity and stuff. And you know, same for me. I looked into all these. Some of them are my friends who've had this happen to them, unfortunately. And in all cases, at least that I've seen so far, in the dozens that I've known about, two-factor authentication was either not enabled on one or more of the accounts, or there was another obvious vulnerability that the user should have known about. And it was essentially user error that got, you know, like left the front door open kind of thing. So maybe we can talk about, I don't know how important you think that might be for the audience to,
well, I think it's
to review some of those.
I think it's important just to know that somebody, if you don't have these security risks taken care of beforehand, somebody else who's very clever might see, you know, you've got some wealth online and they decide to alleviate you of that wealth. Lisa and I have a friend who lives like 10 minutes from here who was a Bitcoin millionaire, and he was alleviated of his Bitcoins illegally. And, you know, it's kind of an arduous process to try to track and see who did it and, you know, that whole sort of thing. And so I just want to know, you know, for the audience, it's like there are risks. And there are ways to mitigate those risks, and those risks, you know, are mitigated by taking a series of steps and employing some software and understanding what the risks are at any given time of the development of Bitcoin, because the risks change. So it's, you know, there's a learning curve, but I also see a lot of people using it successfully. And I see a lot of liberty-minded people using it successfully. And so I'd like to be one of those liberty-minded people who learns how to use it successfully. And I want to thank you for bringing your expertise to the table, because without this sort of conversation, people are just left with, oh, it's, 10 easy steps and there you go. And you've done it and you're doing it. But after years of doing that, you might have some wealth accumulated and you might not ever know these steps had we not had a little conversation. So it's just about, introducing this idea, and here's how to do it, but also here's the risks that go along with it, and here's the kind of the necessary things that you need to do to secure yourself in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy to be here to help with that, because I think it's so important. Bitcoin is pretty easy when you get right down to it, but what's not easy is fixing all the bad habits that we've been left with, or really because of because children in schools in our generation learning the internet, we're teaching our teachers how to use it, and there was no real formal handed down Linux developers or anything coming to elementary and middle schools to teach computer science or basic computer and network security or any of that stuff. So it's something that's really far behind, and I think part of why we have such an insecure internet is because people have just enjoyed the conveniences that the internet provides and haven't been required or been urged or directed to put in the work to learn how to, not be so exposed to so many of the vulnerabilities that are out there. So, just the other day, I had a family member close by to where I am tell me, they walked into the place I'm staying pretty kind of in a rush and said that their Facebook had been hacked. And someone in Spanish was sending Facebook messages to their family members, and this is how they found out. And they wanted to go and unplug the internet from the wall and turn off their phone to stop this. And that's not
how you do it.
That's not how you do it. So again, this is about teaching us, relearning or learning for the first time, completely without shame or any hindrance whatsoever, that there's some new behaviors that we need to have and new understandings to gain that are pretty straightforward if you're with the right folks. And I'm glad to be here with you, because I think I'm one of the people who can share this information, hopefully in a simple way. So yeah, the first step to using Bitcoin is to secure whatever email account you're going to associate. Now, most of us have multiple email accounts. If you don't and you want to experiment, let's say you only have one email account, it's a good idea to sign up for a second email account that you just use only for your Bitcoin activities. And then to secure that new email account with a strong password and turn on two-factor authentication. And if you're using Gmail or Yahoo, this is easy to do in the account settings. You might have to look around for a tab that says security or general settings. Sometimes it's in the general settings. Sometimes it's in the there's a separate settings for passwords. It's in there. Sometimes it's in the advanced settings. When you get through all the settings, there's still a link for advanced settings. You can click down on that and see it in there. Search around and do some Googling to whatever service you're using, how to turn on two-factor authentication with Ymail or Hotmail. Just do some Googling. It'll be straightforward, but do so. And use, rather than use a text alert or an email alert for your second factor, use this app I'm talking about, either Authy or Google Authenticator. It's much harder to crack that than it is. It's very difficult to crack both your password and something coming from SMS or text message. But it's even harder to do so for this app. So that's what I recommend for the second factor. You can find ways to enable that in the various services, and maybe we can walk through that at the end. But once you have two-factor turned on your new email or your existing email, it might also be a good idea to change your password, your existing password, and then you can start looking at some ways that you'd like to use Bitcoin. And then that kind of brings us to blockchain.
Okay. Well, I'm going to bring up blockchain.info. I've got their beginners frequently asked questions up. That's what I was reading through beforehand. That was the type of homework I did for this episode. And I'll just go back to their homepage. And I suspect we're going to be looking for this button at the top called Wallet. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So, now, before we move to Wallet, what are people looking at when they look at this homepage? It says blockchain.info in the URL, and it says home. and it's got some latest transactions and this sort of stuff. Is there anything that we need to know about on the homepage? What is this? What is this for people? Is this like a market board for Bitcoin, or how would they understand it in like Wall Streetese, what most people are familiar with as far as investing or using currency?
Sure. So first things first, look at the address bar. If you've typed in blockchain.info or you're following links to get to blockchain.info, especially if you're following links, make sure that in the address bar there's an S as in Sam after HTTP, and that the full address is only https://blockchain.info. If there's any out of place letters or an extra letter or .com or .org, now I will say this: blockchain.com is legitimate link for this company as well. This is their merchant portal, which I can share more about later. But for the consumer side, for just the daily use, go to blockchain.info. Make sure that you're on the correct website, because blockchain.info is the subject of many, many, many very sophisticated phishing attacks. Phishing is with a PH, and that's a term for faking that you're Chase Bank to get people's account information. And so you design a website that's maybe chas3.com, which you might not think, which you think maybe people would catch, but it's amazing how these social engineering attacks and these phishing attacks catch a lot of people who are just going quickly. They might be, users of whatever level of experience.
Right, they're just playing on our habits, and so you have to make a habit out of being vigilant, because from habit that the world contains predators and people who want to plunder your production. And that's fine as long as we're all being secure about it and being vigilant. We can make sure that we enter the address in there. There's no extra letters or spaces. The S after HTTP is for secure. That's a good sign on a site. And the .info is also important, although you said blockchain.com also is a legitimate site. So now we know, and we can move forward. And if anyone had any questions about phishing, before you get a Bitcoin account, go and study the art of phishing, phishing, where people are trying to steal your valuable information that aren't Facebook or Google or YouTube.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not the recreational activity of being an angler, and this is not the rock band from Vermont either. It's a different phishing. So just to make that distinction. So what we're looking at on blockchain.info is you see some activity, some refreshing going on in the lower left-hand quadrant of the site, kind of, without scrolling. That's every current Bitcoin transaction that's going through the entire blockchain of Bitcoin. Now, I just want to, for anyone out there, I just want to make the distinction. Blockchain with no space between the words block and chain, that's a brand name for this company whose site we're on. Blockchain with the space between the words is the term for really what the main invention is behind Bitcoin. It's the real profound, like, transcendent aspect of this technology, and I can talk more about that.
Well, you're referring to the original Satoshi idea that it's going to encapsulate every transaction, and those transactions are going to be publicly searchable, and people can look online and look. They can take the address where they're going to make a donation or give you money through Bitcoin, and they can check you out. So unlike a credit card statement, which used to once upon a time come in the mail and be private, and you knew what you spent, and the credit card company did, but anyone with a wireless didn't. Now this is something that's public and it's out there. And so how is it anonymous if everything is kept in the blockchain for future purposes? Who knows what future purpose they might find for that? And how does this work for people to assuage any concerns that they might have?
Yeah. So one of the things that's one of the main intrinsic traits of Bitcoin is that it's transparent. You've heard maybe people in the media mistakenly refer to it as anonymous. Maybe even some early proponents of Bitcoin liked the fact that it gave them more anonymity in their online payments. All that is true, but Bitcoin is not, by its nature alone, anonymous. It's fully transparent. This is something I think, as a freedom-loving individual, is actually one of the unsung, incredible traits of Bitcoin. And I could talk about that for hours. But if you're interested in preserving privacy and anonymity, Bitcoin's a great start. but you may also need some additional tools when you're making your Bitcoin transactions, and also some other behavioral things that we'll go through towards the end of our tutorial here. But basically, there are tools that will support users who want to achieve anonymity in their transactions. So there's things like Dark Wallet, which is a project that includes a bunch of different technologies to make sending and receiving Bitcoins much more anonymous than it is just in the native software. And there are reasons to use it that way. I think anyone who would like to choose to use it that way should be able to do so. And that's a part of why Bitcoin is so wonderful, is because it's kind of this naked technology that you can build all kinds of choices onto. And it's great that way. So if you are interested in Bitcoin for its anonymous potential, then there's additional tools and research you'll need to do on your own. And there's lots of talk and chatter on all of the popular Bitcoin message boards out there. So I highly recommend you get engaged on the subreddit, the Bitcoin subreddit. And there's other similar subreddits for anonymous users or people interested in the anonymity of Bitcoin. There's a great YouTube web show by a friend of mine named Christoph Atlas. I think it's every Wednesday, actually. It's called Dark News. So if you just search Dark News on YouTube, you can learn a lot from him and his research. So there's lots of resources out there for people interested in this use case. So
just as an example, the title Dark News, what is meant by the use of the word dark in that title?
Yeah, it's about privacy. Mm-hmm. So same thing with Dark Wallet and
Cody Wilson, sure.
Yeah, the formerly named Dark Market, which is a really incredible story. I was at the Bitcoin conference in Toronto in April, and there was a hackathon there. And someone that you may be familiar with, if you're familiar with Cody Wilson, is Amir Taki. He's worked with Cody on this Dark Wallet project. And he, at the hackathon in Toronto in April, he basically in 30 hours coded a working prototype for Dark Market, which is essentially an anonymous eBay.
Zone? Because an
anonymous eBay.
It's not so much that people want to be anonymous. I mean, transparency is not a problem unless there's this thing called the IRS trying to extract your wealth and productivity all the time. And then it's like, the purpose of this global e-currency movement. And we can talk about the NSA MIT paper later, and why it's not a factor. It's like, even if they are, so what? You can use this to your advantage short term, and if it works out long term, great. So yeah, let's just talk about the use of the term dark. Dark just simply means off the map of the regulators and them, they, those who want to control you.
Yeah, pretty much. It's meant to be preserving of your privacy and autonomy through anonymity. And there's lots of tools that are helping with that. There's actually alternative coins, alternative cryptocurrencies that are building incredibly innovative feature sets around this maxim of privacy and anonymity, and they're fascinating and very much worth a study. So the pace of innovation in this whole field is so encouraging and really motivating for anyone in your audience, Rich. I know as a fellow audience member, longtime audience member of Peace Revolution podcast and Tragedy and Hope Productions, that this is why I watched and listened to your shows, and is to get me where I am with Bitcoin. So yeah, I guess back to the homepage on blockchain.info. You see a bunch of stuff that you're probably not going to readily understand if you're brand new to Bitcoin. I mentioned the lower left-hand quadrant is the real-time updating list of transactions that are presently taking place and being broadcast. So, we got derailed a little bit differentiating between the brand blockchain and the technology of a blockchain. And what the blockchain does as a technology is basically records history and of one behavior, and that behavior is a transaction of value represented by cryptographic random numbers, essentially, that can be proven. There's all these different proofs involved, and what that does is it gets stronger the older it gets. The history is preserved more so the older or the longer ago it occurred, which is much different than what we're used to in history texts and stories. And it's very important. I think the power to steal from Bitcoin, the network, would essentially require the power to reverse time or go back in time. And that's,
I'm sure there's some tax dollars somewhere at work on a project like that. But
sure.
For now, we don't have to worry about it unless in some point in the future they do get that, and then it's a moot point. So whatever.
Right. Yeah, so it's a shared public ledger that's updated in real time that records every single transaction, and does so in perpetuity, and it gets stronger as it gets older. And everything is irreversible, uninterruptible, unreversible.
After you have a confirmation.
After you have a confirmation, correct? Yeah, and that's every 10 minutes with Bitcoin. So, and without getting into too much of the technical part of how the software works, which is very interesting and important. In fact, it opens my eyes up to all kinds of philosophical truths that have been shrouded in mystery from us for so long. Bitcoin really answers lots of these questions and really shines a new light on them. It's fascinating once you look very closely at it that way. But to move right along to a wallet creation, and then we can maybe come back to this homepage and talk a little bit more about what you're seeing here. And there's some news on the right. There's a search bar which allows you to search addresses and first bits, an IP address or an SHA hash. And we don't really need to know what those are right now, but it's definitely worth learning. And then at the bottom, there's some helpful links. So at the top, in the black bar at the very top of the website, there's at the right-hand side a button for wallet. Click on that. And everyone who's brand new is going to start a new wallet, and the green button below that, create my free wallet, is essentially the same button. So whichever one of those you want is fine. And in the future, when you want to log into your blockchain account through the website, because there's several ways to do it. There's a desktop app, there's a browser plugin, there's the web app itself, which is where we are, and there's mobile apps. So there's all sorts of ways to access your money. But anyway, you can log in the middle there if you're on the website. So start a new wallet. And it's pretty self-explanatory at this point. But what you do is you use that email that you just secured with two-factor authentication and change the password. And the reason for that is because some social engineering attacks and phishing attacks or even Trojans will go after your email account to then get access to your blockchain account. And there are many cases where my acquaintances or colleagues have had two-factor authentication setting enabled on their wallet, but not on their email. And a hacker was able to get into their email, reset their password through their, from their email, reset their blockchain password, and get access to their funds that way. So that's why securing the email with two-factor is so important. And I have yet to hear of an instance, and again, nothing's 100% secure, but I have yet to hear of an instance, and I live and breathe this stuff daily for over a year now, of anyone getting their Bitcoin stolen who's using blockchain with two-factor and a powerful email client with two-factor, whether that's Yahoo or Gmail or another, like a self-hosted email that allows two-factor. Self-hosted would even be more secure than Gmail, obviously. But Gmail and Yahoo are fine for this. So you enter that email, and then you will choose a very complex password. And you can use a password with spaces in it. And I highly recommend that you do so, because spaces increase the entropy or the strength of a password immensely. So if you could use more than one space and maybe a couple nonsensical words, maybe not nonsensical.
So you just use a passage from James Joyce, and you got a sentence that's got a period and a bunch of spaces and a bunch of words that don't make any sense unless
except
really think about them.
I wouldn't use anything out of a book.
No,
I wouldn't use anything.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, James Joyce would probably be the only one that
He'd
might
be a
work.
great password generator. Can I get the James Joyce password generator? Yeah, tell people why they shouldn't do that.
Well, they shouldn't do that because they're not so affectionately called script kiddies, but there are lots of people who know how to buy software online that essentially is a theft kit, a lock-picking kit. and they don't create the software, but all they have to do is run the software, and it allows them to hack people. And they're just petty thieves, really. This is one of the biggest threats is people who think they know what they're doing, but really don't. They're just relying on someone else's creation to break into. And some of these creations or these tools may have, white hat or beneficial uses, on enterprise level.
Okay. So, because I know a couple people in the audience just stopped and said, wait a minute, they sell kits to break in and hack into. Yes, they do. And you don't want to be on that mailing list because at some point the FBI might, need to run that mailing list. And you don't want to be one of those people because if they get short on the fish they're catching, they go to stuff like that. But
Absolutely.
The other thing is you need to know that these things are out there. And just like a lock picking kit for your house or whatever, like people can do this. And, some very young kid in school these days can get their hands on one of these kits and not have to know a whole bunch. And they can be pretty malicious and irrational, et cetera, et cetera. So the more you understand the internet landscape and all the bonuses as well as the pitfalls that are out there and know where those pitfalls are, you're all the better for it because you don't want to be one of those victims, and so you want to not be the low-hanging fruit. And that's
exactly.
When I don't know what I'm doing, which is anytime right before I learn, I know I'm the low-hanging fruit. So learning must take place. And to do that, you got to observe the territory and take all the relevant data in, contradictories, situations. You got to remove those. And you're left with questions. It took me a long time to get my questions answered. Bitcoin's been around for 4 years, and only in the last probably the last 6 weeks through Porkfest and Ernie and Tim and Will, have I gotten all my concerns addressed in a very polite, reasonable, and rational way, which has made me happy and interested because everyone seems to be so nice that's using that currency. So
it's amazing.
And so I'm one of those nice people, and but I'm still naive about it. So I'm trying to figure out. And as I go through, I think a lot of people in the audience are realizing it's like, whoa, before I can do that, I need to do some homework and a couple tasks and some getting things done projects maybe to do to get in line with this. I know I had to go buy a new USB key just for this situation. So there's a number of different not hoops you have to jump through, but these are precautions you have to take if you want to remain safe and have your assets or wealth secure. Because, it's an emerging market. It might be volatile right now, but no one knows where it's going. It could go sky high and, people could adopt it all over the place. So anyway.
Yeah. What I'm seeing about the potential, be safe for sure. And the potential is real. There's too much money from too many smart people going into projects around this technology for it to be some kind of flash in the pan. It's right. Not that it will be around in some way, shape, or form. And this is what we can get into when we talk more about the NSA paper and stuff and the urgencies we have with those who are willing to use this technology now, and our responsibility to the future users of a hopefully free Bitcoin. We can talk about I don't like the word duty per se, but what some might find as a calling or whatever in advancing this. Because as you said, it's funny, you get involved in this and you realize how incredibly intelligent and incredibly kind and generous so many of the people involved in this, in using, users of this currency are. And it's not, I don't think it's an accident at all. I think
it makes sense that they'd be the early adopters. They're the people
right.
who can and do and don't just sit around and wait for the herd. They're like, oh, let me figure that out. Let me find the shortcoming. Let me improve it. Let me share it with friends. So, and
I think it's also a function of when you remove the tacit physical violence from, a financial system. You get nice people and pretty much honest behavior, for the most part. So for the folks who are in public and stuff. So anyway, I guess I want to check in with anybody who's following along. So you've probably entered your email and chosen a very long, difficult, hopefully randomly generated password with spaces in it. And maybe you've also backed that up on paper and pencil or paper and pen. Yeah, I got to make sure. So once folks have gone through and signed up for their wallet and written down their recovery mnemonic, which is those 20 words you want to write down and save just somewhere secure for you. Again, I use a notebook for most of it, but you're going to continue and it'll log you out and have you log in. So make sure you remembered what password you used and go ahead and log in and then tell me what you see, Rich.
All right, so I see my wallet with $0 in it, or 0 Bitcoins in it, rather. I'm used to having $0 in my wallet, and now this is a new thing. I got $0, 0 Bitcoins in my Bitcoin account. And then I see a QR code and a Bitcoin address.
Yeah, so that first address there, the long string of letters and numbers, that's your first public address. So you can share that with folks like you would share your email address in order to receive emails. You would share that string of numbers or the QR code representation of it with anyone that you'd like to send you money.
So it's identification. That's how you know.
The public keys are kind of identification. You can create as many of them as you possibly can and use them however you'd like. You can make your public key public or not. There's lots of public keys that I keep private for transacting money with myself, to move funds around my accounts. So that's one reason to not share a public key. If you don't want someone searching that public key and viewing the transaction history and balance and other information. They may not have your name. All they may have is the public key, but they can still see the activity on that address. But you can create accounts willy-nilly, and as long as you control the private key and also keep the public key private as well, so then ostensibly you would be the only one who could send that address money, and that would be, really kind of off the radar.
So what you're saying is if I want to keep 0 Bitcoins on my account, don't share that address with anybody. And if I want someone to put the Bitcoin in the account, then you share the address. Seems
right.
simple. Seems simple enough. There's 2 purposes you can use it for. And when you want to diversify your risk, you move some of the Bitcoins off your public address into one of those ones that's not printed publicly. And that seems to be how the universe is operating at this time. Am I correct?
Pretty much, yeah. So, anyone can watch the blockchain transactions go through in real time, like that lower left-hand quadrant of the homepage of blockchain.info.
Sure.
And, if they have the time and the horsepower, they can look at every single one of those transactions and try to map them out and whatever. There's an immense amount of workload involved in that. And even, the best data forensics engineers, it's an incredibly tall order. So even for supercomputers,
it is today. But I always picture technology increasing in the future, at least from the people who have unlimited funding. And so I'm always just worried about, it's fine today. It's hard to crack today, but I've seen this in the past where there's patterns where then it's easy to crack. All of a sudden, everyone's internet and web browser has been, so there's been a lot of hacking in the last year that's been done for, not because people were exploring, that's the hacker's nature, is an exploring thing. People have been systematizing theft using hacker skills, right? Mm-hmm. So people who don't have so good morals or naive, or not naive, but like good intentions of just looking around and, that's what hackers do. Some people have systematized it to take your personal data, and they've made businesses out of this. And dare I say, cartels and gangs are exploring these new markets, right?
Yeah, there's certainly lots of thieves out there looking to crack or break Bitcoin, and if they can't do that, which no one has been able to, they're going to try to steal from people who aren't safeguarding their private information well enough.
All right, so now I have a Bitcoin wallet, and I'll go about a fundraising effort. That's in the future. Let's talk about what I can do in the future to make it more secure as I go, or what are the other things that people at home need to consider as far as, it's easy to set it up, but it's tough to protect it. And, what should they know? Yeah,
I think folks should know that when you're using something like blockchain, you're you should probably use this service not for long-term storage, but more for like spending cash, or like you would put cash in your wallet and walk around town with or something, just your weekly spending habits or whatever. Some people use it for long-term storage, and I would advise against that. I think for long-term storage, there are much more secure and more private means to do so, such as creating paper wallets or offline wallets. Sometimes you hear it referred to as cold storage for your Bitcoins.
Sure. So one way is, people are familiar. You can exchange Bitcoin for Federal Reserve notes, but that's not really the solution to not storing it all in your Bitcoin account. You can also just move it into another wallet that's not published. Therefore, you're keeping your interest in Bitcoin because, as Cody Wilson says, holding Federal Reserve notes is a political decision these days. And I think it always has been, but it's more obvious these days. There's a couple different ways that you can lower or minimize your risk. Just keep enough cash in your public Bitcoin account for month to month or week to week transactions, whatever you might need, and then transfer them in your, from your cold storage or your paper wallets that are someplace else, not connected to something digital, and you can transfer it back and forth. Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So what other security precautions might people need to take into consideration, or what are the other low-hanging fruit topics when we look at Bitcoin? Beforehand, we looked at the email and how you need to secure your email, and then you can secure your Bitcoin account. What other things that we need?
Yeah. So for blockchain, if you're on your wallet home page where it says My Wallet and you've got some buttons on the right and your in large bold print, your public Bitcoin address on the left, there should be a button for account settings. So you'd go there and you'd go through all of the security settings that are there and turn all of them on pretty much. And there's some that there's some check boxes that I don't check, for convenience sake. But basically, that's where you would turn on two-factor authentication and link it to your phone or your email or an app on your phone. And I would prefer or recommend that folks use the app. And then there are other security settings as well, like another password that's used only for spending funds. So you need a password to get into your account plus a two-factor password. And then in order to spend money, you need a separate password. So this is another layer of security that blockchain has implemented, and some other wallets do this too, to prevent folks from stealing your money if in the event that they do get in.
Right.
So that's another layer of security, and you can go through those settings. And the only one that I really strongly encourage people enable is the two-factor authentication. Other than that, it's really up to you. But a really solid way to protect yourself with Bitcoins using blockchain is to two-factor your email and two-factor the wallet, and then write down your passwords and store the backups, effectively. So another thing you can do is blockchain. Anytime you operate in your wallet, like send or receive money, or if you create a new Bitcoin address inside that wallet, you're going to get an email from blockchain to that email you connected it with that includes a file that's encrypted because you did that in your security settings. And that'll be attached to an email that's sent to you just as a backup. Every time it updates, it sends you a backup. And what I do is I have a place where I store that backup file, and I update it every time, and then I throw that email away. And if I saved the backup file on my computer hard drive, I throw that away too. So I delete those files after I've saved them in another secure spot. And again, if someone had access to that file, like from your email account, or maybe it's on a thumb drive and they gained access to it, they'd still have to crack the password to get into the file.
So, by separating the USB drive or the thumb drive from your computer, that file is on there. And just because someone has that doesn't mean they can have access to your account. So it's about creating these obstacles for someone who would want to, penetrate your security and get into your account.
Yeah, and again, when you take these steps to strengthen, that take, even the strongest computers and the most sophisticated hackers will take weeks, months, or even years to break a strong password. And they'll just move on to, an easier target.
Fruit, right.
Yeah.
What I was calling the low-hanging fruit, but that's what you're saying what it is. It's the easier targets. It's the targets they get more for spending less time. It's just about efficiency, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's lots of folks out there who, just don't take these important steps, and even if they might think they can get away with it for a short time, and then some of them have gotten burned. Some friends, even very savvy Bitcoin users, who have gotten phones, wallets that are on their phone stolen because they didn't. They were like, "Oh, it's going to be quick for this weekend, and then I'll delete it," but they didn't take the time to secure it properly. So. It's unfortunate. So yeah, I really want folks to think about it from the user security side with the emails and the passwords first and foremost, because that's going to be the way that you feel empowered by strengthening all the security and making yourself a very, very hard target. That feels good.
Well,
so,
the empowerment feelings on the other side of that learning curve, because at the beginning you probably don't feel empowered. You feel like I got some learning to do. And after you do that, now you understand not only why you need it, but how it works, how to do it. And the fact that eventually it'll be evolved, or something will out-evolve it, and you'll have to change tactics or methods. Mm-hmm. And so usually when those attacks happen, they attack the people who haven't updated X, or changed their password on Y, or any of these other things. So just it's a habit of being able to just go ahead and change your activities every now and then when you notice that the security is no longer there.
Right. Yeah, and I know for you, Rich, it's a major concern regarding the email accounts and which one to use and which one's best for long-term protection from both the thieves online and also, more Leviathan-shaped actors out there. So,
well, speaking of Leviathan-shaped actors, we can move. I just want to talk about the NSA paper for 5 minutes. Is this a point where we could do that and close the show, or is there something other applicable information?
Yeah, I guess my last word before we get into that, I would just want to point out that there are tools for anonymizing your activity online that are sort of related to Bitcoin, but really exclusive of Bitcoin. One tool that's really useful. And maybe we can do, another video doing how to create offline storage for your Bitcoins. But that tool is Tails, the Tails operating system. Very, very good way to make your activity on a computer almost undetectable, whether it's a public computer or even your own private personal computer. And you can generate your addresses using that, and there's no trace pretty much when you're done, and print that, and there's no trace pretty much, and you've just got the only record of the wallet is the paper that's in your hand. So there's some great resources out there how to do this, make it very simple.
Yeah, we can make a video what to do after you have Bitcoins in your wallet.
Sure.
How to manage the risk when you do have some wealth in your Bitcoin wallet. But for today's conversation, I took the leap, and we actually got a Bitcoin wallet created, which seems so far off to me sometimes because all the technical nature of trying to make it secure. And I don't have a Google or Yahoo account that I use, so my IT nature is a little bit different than the general person trying to sign up to Bitcoin. But the NSA paper that you and I had talked about just briefly in our private conversations. I have it pulled up here someplace right here. The title you're looking for on the internet would be "How to Make a Mint: The Cryptography of Anonymous Electronic Cash." And it's a paper from June 1996, and it's on groups.csail.mit.edu. And I can put a link to it in the notes, but it's an NSA publication from 1996 that's held in the archive on the MIT website. So in there, it has the contents, electronic payments, security of electronic payments. This is back in the days when they still had credit cards, and that was like a new thing only for the 20 years before the 90s. So, these things, the need for electronic cash and currency and spending and other monetary tactics and strategies and applications were all in the development stage. So I found this to be an interesting research paper where they're saying, hey, what's the next level? And they're calling for these e-coins. And I saw a lot of things that seemed to be very similar to what Bitcoin is. And I'm not saying Bitcoin is that, but I had to say these two things are similar. How are they different? And you were one of the few people that were able to say, yeah, I've looked at that document. I had similar concerns. And how did you assuage your concerns?
Yeah, so when I was, going through my learning curve of Bitcoin and trying to decide if this was, everything that it was looking like it was, the answer to so many of the questions that we've been facing in terms of financial privacy and autonomy and these kinds of things. And in reading this, it certainly raised lots of red flags, much like it did for you, Rich. But upon like close inspection, about a year and a half ago now, when I first came across this, there's some distinct and very important differences between what Bitcoin is and how it was made, and what this paper is proposing and discussing. And the big one is just the elephant in the room with Bitcoin in general, which is the blockchain that I referred to.
You're right. It's not included in that paper. They don't describe anything like Satoshi or the blockchain at that point in 1996 in that particular paper. You're right.
Mm-hmm. And the reason that's important is, you might think, well, in 1996 there was no talk of blockchains. This wasn't a concept in computer science really, very much tested or utilized or even really understood. But now maybe it was, and maybe 1996 was a long time ago. Yada yada yada. But really, the first time we saw one of these things was with the release of Bitcoin. And the properties of a blockchain are unique as well, and very much affirming of individual freedom and other small L libertarian ideals, for lack of a better broad term. And those are the incontrovertible nature, the irreversible nature of blockchain and how it stores information, creating the history timeline of time-stamped transactions that's shared in real time on everyone's computer. And the other there's other core features of the blockchain that I think are really individually empowering and encouraging as a demonstration of how humans can voluntarily cooperate in large groups without compromising any of their individual integrity. Bitcoin is an example of that in practice for me and for a lot of other people. I could go into more of those blockchain features, but another thing that really jumped out at me about this paper is that it's all discussing everywhere, even in the passive language of the paper, it's discussing a centrally organized, centrally managed and controlled system of e-cash. And this isn't uncommon. This isn't like because it's a government paper or anything. This is probably because this was the only way human beings really thought to organize projects of this type of scale, global electronic cash, throughout human history up until very recently, 5-6 years ago.
And that's another astute observation. You're right. The NSA paper from 1996 talks about it being centralized. How is Bitcoin different? Is it decentralized, distributed, peer-to-peer? What verbiage would you use to describe it?
I think it really does a little bit of all that. So a lot of people like to use those two D words together. I think losing the D words until you get to the specifics is fine. If you just say peer-to-peer cash, peer-to-peer electronic cash, that's the way Satoshi described it in the subheading of his original paper. That's the most useful way for people who are somewhat computer knowledgeable. Maybe they are aware of or understand BitTorrent and how that works. And just another astute observation, for those of us with concerns about how much ability there would be on the part of the state, for example, to co-opt Bitcoin, it's useful. I know Andreas Antonopoulos harkens to this example a lot, and I think it's a good one. It's useful to think of Napster and file sharing in general, and how that emerged right around the time of this paper being published. And file sharing was something that was very centralized and very revolutionary and very empowering for the masses, but it was centralized.
Until it was peer-to-peer, and then it went nuts.
Exactly. Yeah. So Napster wasn't truly peer-to-peer because you could cut the head off of that, that beast, and it was gone. Much like previous incarnations of private currency or even internet currency like e-gold, e-cash, Liberty Dollar, Liberty Reserve. These businesses had figureheads and servers and vaults that could be confiscated and threatened with a cage. So Bitcoin doesn't have any of those features, which is another reason it's this massive upgrade on the idea of electronic cash or private currency.
And those are the precise things that gives me hope, because in order to manage and control it, they basically have to corrupt the blockchain. And to do that, there's a committee of people who control the actual, and it's written in what, C++, am I correct?
It's written in a couple different languages. There's different libraries now, but the basic core code that Satoshi wrote was C++. And so now it lives in Python too, and others. But basically, a large group of developers would have to decide that a change is needed or a good idea. And they would have to go about convincing the mining community and lots of the users in the general Bitcoin community itself at large. They would have to convince much greater than even a supermajority that their change is a good idea. And then if they decided that they wanted to force their hand anyway and make that change anyway, and maybe banking on the strategy that some folks would go along with them, what happens to the code at that point is it's forked. And the original software, without the change, lives on, of course. And those who choose to live in that chain, as it's called, can do so. And then the changers, the folks who wanted the change and implemented it, forked the software and changed the code in a different direction. And they'd have to convince people to follow in that direction until there was this consensus, much greater than a supermajority following along. So the miners being distributed around the world,
yep,
and the process of mining and preserving the code and running the code of Bitcoin is a decentralized process. So there's decentralization there, and then the peer-to-peer, that's how the code was written, to enable these peer-to-peer connections, that any node can connect with any other node or number of nodes on the network at any time. So everyone is real-time sharing this common file.
So it'd be like, to use a metaphor, it'd be like the telephone if your phone call could go between me and Will and not go through Microsoft Skype Central. I guess I mixed metaphors with telephone and Skype. But back in the day, you had telephone and then we had a wire and it went to Verizon or AT&T or whoever the company was, and then it went back out to the person you're talking to, and thankfully things travel at the speed of light. Yeah. You could actually make it work.
Yeah, a good way to visualize it is with the telephone, in fact, because the telephone network grew and gained value in much the same way we saw Bitcoin do in the very earliest days. So in the very early days, Bitcoin was decentralized. It wasn't distributed also because it hadn't distributed yet.
Not yet.
So, and what that looks like is, imagine Satoshi as a hub sharing the software and instructing people how to run it and why to run it, and then other people agreeing to do so. And then once they've gotten comfortable with that, then they have the keys to the castle, so to speak, and start handing out invitations, if you will, to their friends. And so that's how it's grown in a distributed fashion. Distributed fashion. And when it gets to so how it got decentralized is once it reached a certain critical mass, like where 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, and so on and so on. And everyone has more value in the network by the addition of just one more participant. This is much how, like your analogy with the telephone was a good one. You had an operator, and everyone in town could connect to that operator and connect to someone else in town. And then towns had to work together to connect beyond, between towns, and so on and so on and so on. And eventually, it became, fully networked with, of course, a couple central hubs of control or a couple central points of failure, like AT&T and Bell and so on.
All right, so, it was an extended episode because we're having a longer conversation. Bitcoin's a big topic. We're not going to cover it all today, but we've let you know that it exists, how to get a wallet, what some of the security issues are, how to work around those security issues, how to play safe on the internet, and have a good time. And we talked about the past and the history behind developing an electronic cryptocurrency and the differences between the New World Order's plans for this type of currency and what actually is out there being used by individuals who are liberty-minded and want to live and work in a voluntary society where we can all, we can transact with an integrity above the Federal Reserve notes and what they, provide for us, which is nothing but debt. So, Will, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, entertaining some of these questions that I had that, other people just shied away from. You handled them directly, and with your help and Tim Fry and Ernie Hancock, you got me over the hump. You got me to go through some of the technical challenges of securing all this, and I want to applaud you because that's a task 4 years in the making since Bitcoin came out. I've been looking at it, but I always had too many questions or objections. So between the three of you guys, you're some good salespeople.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I mean, it's a personal thrill to just have an opportunity to be a part of a Tragedy and Hope production as a longtime viewer and listener of your work. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I hope we're not done. There's a lot more to share, and
there's a lot
hopefully,
more to share, and there will be the cold storage, that conversation, and then, more conversations. As I learn more, my questions will improve, and then maybe at some point we can, have a conversation with Ernie and Tim, and then talk about how we can, start to use this for liberty-minded projects that we have on our table.
Yeah, and I hope folks can have the courage they need to go and just explore this stuff. You can do dummy accounts and just test things out. Blockchain's great for that. And just dip your toes and experiment with it. And anyone who does, I hope that they might be able to reach out to me on Twitter or somewhere at Milwaukee. That's with it's like Milwaukee, but with my name instead of the MIL. And yeah, and I'd like to give you some Bitcoins. I could give them to you via Twitter or share your public key with me, and then you can actually play with it and experience it. I think that's the best way to convert anybody, is to actually put it in their hands and just let them touch it, so to speak.
Well, yeah, because I already saw a couple things that I'd like to get, and it's Bitcoin only, no Federal Reserve notes, none of that. So I'm looking forward to having something that it's new and it's exciting, and as long as I'm careful, we can have a safe adventure.
Yeah, then the other thing I wanted to, I don't know if you wanted this on camera, I could send you your first Bitcoins if you can show me a QR code.
Oh, if I can show you a QR code? Can I Skype it to you? Oh,
you're getting some cheap coins today, Rich.
Save image as. All right, so I just Skyped you my QR code, and you can do what kind of magic with that QR code now?
Cool. So what I want to do is make sure that everybody that I set up with Bitcoin or help get set up gets a little bit of Bitcoins to play with. Usually I give out like $1 to $5 worth, but I'm going to give a little bit more here to Rich because I've been not in any position to be able to donate or subscribe to anything beyond phone and rent. But I've thoroughly enjoyed so much of your work over the years. I'd be remiss. I've been waiting for you to accept Bitcoin so that I can actually start.
You and a couple other people, back. And I've got the emails. Every time someone said, "What's your Bitcoin address?" How do you I was like, when I get to it.
Yep. So right here, Rich took a picture of his QR code that encoded his public key, his public Bitcoin address, and I'm just going to take a picture of it with my phone here, so that my phone can read that address. And I'm going to send some dollar bills, y'all.
Now, that QR code, for those of you playing at home who might not be familiar with it, it's what really connects the digital world to the actual 3D world that we occupy. Some people call it the meat space, but, it's not necessarily the meat space. It's 3D reality. It's what we like to call reality. And the other one's a digital world of computers and keeping track of barcodes and stuff like that. The QR code allows a bridge between those two worlds, if you will, which you just saw. We sent it. His phone read it.
Yeah.
It's doing its thing.
One of the main reasons for the QR code is because it's such an easier way than copying and pasting with mobile devices. You just represent this text in the QR code. You can represent lots of information in a QR code, but Bitcoin and addresses and sharing addresses has been like the one legitimate use case that QR codes have ever found, in my opinion. And you see them everywhere, and they're just like extra.
Unless you have like a concert poster and the QR code takes you to buy the concert tickets or something like that. It was something that was more sporadically used for marketing purposes, whereas now it's used for everyday purposes.
Right. And sent. So, Rich, if you're logged in to your blockchain account, you should be able to see that.
0.037 BTC. It's no longer at zero. I would say this was a successful conversation because we got the wallet set up and I'm no longer broke.
And you got some cheap Bitcoins too, because I don't think we're going to see it get much lower than this.
Well, then today is one of those fortuitous days in history where the Bitcoins are cheap and freely flowing. And I want to thank you personally, and I'm sure Lisa would want to thank you when she's done manning the cameras, because, as you saw, it took a little patience and a little persistence to get through the process, especially to do it securely. Now, anyone can just set it up in a minute and they can do that. But, I'm trying to do things responsibly, and I've spent enough of my years being naive that at least now, if I'm going to be naive, it's because I didn't ask all the questions I needed to, but I was asking questions, and that's how you get to improve. So,
yeah. I mean, if anyone wants to set up a Bitcoin wallet in less than a minute, go to, rushwallet.com, move your mouse around, and boom, you got a Bitcoin wallet. Bookmark that browser page and, don't show anybody the URL.
Right.
That's a quick wallet. But again, there's some, unknowns and vulnerabilities, and it's not really that easy. There's a lot going on in the background with something like that, but that's a very quick way to get one. I'm really glad that, you allowed me to come on and share, what I think is really the most important message around Bitcoin right now for the average computer user who might be interested. And that is, keeping yourself safe and feeling under control of this really new and pretty far out high-tech thing for most folks. So I feel like I have a way of translating that for the average folk, and I'd like to do that.
Well, I think you've done a great job here today, and I'm sure at the end of this video, Ernie can just relax and sigh of relief. Richard's on Bitcoin. Now we can help him out. But this is something that we've been talking about, he and I, for a couple years now, and he shares some of the concerns I had. But you notice he also uses it. So he's like, I know about the casino being rigged, but I know how to play this game safely right here. And that's kind of what
it puts more of the factors in your own hands, and so many of those factors are behind closed doors, behind locked vaults. So the public never gets to see it. If there's shenanigans with the entire Bitcoin system and that's your concern, it's something that would be available and we'd all be aware of, and
so you wouldn't be alone. Whereas if you get ripped off by the FDIC or someone robs a bank or whatever, you're kind of alone in that against the government. So at least now we can stand together. And I'm just impressed that you're able to take people through this, what is an arduous process for the uninitiated and the naive. You're able to take us through. And, I'd heard so many success stories. I was like, well, that's the guy I'm going to talk to, Ernie. He sounds like the right guy.
I'm really glad he connected us, and we can thank Blake Anderson too, because I think Ernie first reached out to Blake, and Blake was very busy at the time, and I had some time, and I made time because I'm glad to talk to you.
Well, I'm glad to talk to you too. Just that not just that you're a listener of some of the stuff that I've done in the past and a fan of the Peace Revolution, but that as a result of Ernie talking to Blake and you're friends with Blake, we're able to just who needs what help and what answer, questions answered. And within a couple of days, it's all done lickety split. So I'm super appreciative, and I'll continue to express my appreciation to Blake as well as Tim and Ernie and yourself, because like I said, it wasn't easy getting me off the my fence here, looking at it, not getting any better. But, sometimes it's the people with the right attitude and the right answers right there at the right time. That's how you get off the fence. So I'm happy to be on the side of the BTC side of the fence right now. And the Federal Reserve notes can take a little background maybe, and maybe we can get some support, because I know there's a lot of people out there that have been asking, when can they donate in Bitcoin? Well, the answer is starting a couple minutes ago, apparently. So, Will, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This will be the first of many conversations, not just publicly, but also we'll continue talking privately. And I look forward to learning how to further secure any fractions of Bitcoin I might get, or Bitcoins in the future, and creating the offline storage, the cold wallet, that sort of thing. But I think we've given people, especially if they're a novice to this topic, a lot to think about for today. You can always rewind the video and go through the steps. I'll try to make it as clear as possible in post-production, but this is first step on an adventure, and it was a successful step. So thank you for making it pleasant, Will.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, and thanks for having me, and great to meet you and chat with you, and Lisa as well.